that will be the ultimate test of this summit.
Now to our Friday analysis, first of the summit and then the week's other political news. It comes from our regular syndicated columnist, Mark Shields, and tonight Kevin Phillips, editor and publisher of the American Political Report. Well, I guess the G7 is just the talk of the town, is it, Mark?
Everywhere you turn, Roger. I mean, I was, coffee tables, saloons, taverns, bus stops, truck stops. As a general rule at the economic summits, after everything is said and done, a lot more is said than done. But I think this probably worked as a plus, not a substantial, historic, dramatic plus, but a plus for Bill Clinton.
One of the spokesmen over there said that it was as good as we dared hope. What good do you think that summit did, Kevin?
Well, I don't think it did too much good, but on the other hand, I think that one thing Bill Clinton has gotten from having a Republican PR man is they now know how to hype a half-dead summit. And what you have here is a trade concession, which doesn't really shake up the history books at all, made into a big event. And it's linked to the great thing in American politics, jobs. Now, we used to hear this from George Bush. George Bush would go to a summit, some minor trade thing would be talked about, jobs would be uttered, nobody would take it seriously. Now, the big question is, with all the continuing problems that are out there for trade, and this is just the bare bones start of something, will the American people take this seriously, or are they just going to yawn at this summit? I don't think that question's answered yet.
Jobs, 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 when? And
well,
for whom?
No, I think this became part of the president's economic stimulus package, at least rhetorically. He was starting to get tagged here at home as just a deficit reduction president. And I thought they made the best of what they had, quite frankly. He took the deficit reduction, which he'd been battered on and criticized here at home, and made it his trump card. He, in fact, took his domestic program and said, this gave me the greater international credibility with all the other countries, and congratulated the Congress, congratulated them for what they'd done and stood up and so forth. But the jobs thing lingers, and there are doubts and nagging doubts about NAFTA, North American Free Trade Act, where people by a better than 2-to-1 margin feel that it's going to cost jobs. So what Bill Clinton has to do is make the case for America staying involved in the world and somehow justify it in terms that eventually there's going to be jobs for Americans.
Kevin, what do you think the future is of these economic summits? Have they outlived their usefulness?
I think the summits in general have outlived their usefulness because you don't have the cohesion between the Western politicians that you had during the 80s. They were all in much better shape in the polls, and they could do things together in deregulation and tax cuts and in coordinating monetary policy. They can't really do that now. It's clear that Clinton, for all that he likes the PR opportunity, is trying to figure out a way to put a more reasonable summit together that doesn't create false expectations. But I think it's a very important point that Mark made about when you have this jobs issue out there linked to trade, the giant walking in the woods is not GATT, which is what they're talking about here, but NAFTA. And instead of dealing with people who just sort of smile at the references to trade, you've got Ross Perot out there. And he basically says trade liberalization is not a job creator. It's a job killer. And that resonates in large parts of the United States, not least the Mississippi Valley, which has been losing jobs where he wasn't while they were having problems this week.
That's absolutely true.
So do I take it then that the economic summit really has become a political stage for politicians to perform on, and that the time for real, I mean, those 7 leaders are not powerful enough at home to have done anything real, are they?
Well, I think the implicit statement was almost made by the president. The president went out there and he used it for domestic political purposes, and I think adroitly, and I think well, for which he deserves some credit. He didn't stumble, but it was almost an implicit and tacit acknowledgement that the other 6 weren't going to be there, that they weren't factors. Kevin's point about their inability to act collectively. I looked at the language last year in Munich. They threatened collective force against the Serbs and the Croats if they did not recognize the Bosnian autonomy. And now the stronger measures are not excluded, was this year. I mean, that in itself says just about everything you want to say about their collective will and ability to act.
The president is now slowly making his way home. He's going to stop in South Korea. and then he'll drop off in Hawaii for a vacation. Is it a good idea to have a vacation right now, Kevin?
Well, he may need a vacation, but I think one of the difficulties he's up against here is he's starting to look like he's back in the international travel business that George Bush was in. I listen to some of what he says, and I start to hear echoes of George Bush. Now, that ought to make the Democratic political people nervous, because they were the ones that put on those T-shirts about the, the stay-at-home gang, we don't travel all the time. And now, here they are, they're talking about international trade, they're on the planes, because they can't take what's happening to them back in the United States with a mismanaged economy and botched up social policies.
What do you think,
politically,
Mark?
I would come back. I would come back.
Not stop in Hawaii.
Hawaii is obviously a United State, and a very beautiful United State.
Yeah.
Ask Vice President Quayle of that. But yeah. I would come back just politically. I mean,
come back and do what?
Well, the suffering right now, Roger, in the heartland of the country, which somehow the coastal America manages to think is just somewhere out there between Kansas and Utah, is enormous. I mean, this is the worst flood of the century. Americans are being wiped out, their life, their future, their savings, all the rest of it. Politically, looking at it just in a selfish point of view, every state that butts the Mississippi, save the state of Mississippi, Bill Clinton carried in 1992. This is, if there is a Clinton base, this is it. I mean, I would return to that area. I mean, I thought wisely called there on the radio yesterday and made a radio statement. But I think it's important, and I don't think it is the time for a vacation.
Do you think that when he comes back to Washington, he comes back with enough enhanced political stature to face down two big battles that are coming up next week in Washington? One, the conferees begin to wrestle with the budget package, and two, he's got a deadline on the homosexual campaign pledge, lifting the ban on homosexuals in the military. What do you think, Mark?
I think the stature is not enormously enhanced. He's better off than when he left. Yep. He's better off than he was 3 weeks ago. But he's not a dominant force coming back. I think enough Democrats feel that their fate, fortune, and future is tied to his at this point, that he has an advantage going into the conference. Although there's mumbling and grumbling, there's a sense that we either sink together or sink separately. As far as the gays in the military, I think it will be worked out. I think it will be worked out thanks in large part and credit largely due to Colin Powell. I think he'll deliver a unanimous vote from the Joint Chiefs of Staff in support of a don't ask, don't tell policy, which the president will get some criticism from his left on and his old friends in the gay community, but I think it's the best that he can come out with, and that conduct will be the operative factor.
How about you, Kevin?
Well, I don't think he's coming back with any real strength. And one of the yardsticks of this, which actually kind of amazed me, is that just before he left to go over, Newsweek took a poll, and they found that his job approval rating had inched up, that's their word, inched up to 38%, just a couple of percentage points above where it was a month ago. This, mind you, was after the attack on Iraq. It's just absolutely unprecedented for an American chief executive to successfully attack a foreign power and wind up with virtually nothing after people had a chance to think about it. So I think the American public is coming to a pretty negative judgment on this man.
But the attack didn't have much effect, did it? I mean,
well,
even physical.
The attack didn't have much effect politically, physically, or public opinion-wise. But my point there is that if he could not get his ratings up on a more lasting basis with something like that, I don't think this is going to do it. And I think Mark is exactly right that he's back into these pitfalls. And we can debate what the wisdom of the different positions are on gay rights in the military or what have you, but he's already suffered his damage. Mm-hmm. The key thing is on the tax side and the budget issue.
So what about the tax side and the budget? Do you think he's going to get out of that with what he went in with it? It's $500 billion.
I think he'll come close to the $500 billion. Yes, I really do. I think there's increasing doubts about the jobs. I mean, the fear that Americans have right now is about the economic future, whether there's going to be jobs for them and jobs for their kids. And the specter of the Jack Welch America, the General Electric ideal, which is you cut employment by a third and increase profits, double profits, sort of a jobless prosperity, is terrifying. to generations of Americans who have identified with the company hiring as good times and prosperity. And I think that's Bill Clinton has to deal and confront that real fear.
One last purely political question. Why on earth would the president have done something that no president since FDR did, I think in the Maryland Senate race, which is to get involved in the Chuck Robb, Douglas Wilder Senate race endorsing Senator Robb for re-election? Why would he do that?
Well, to quote Thomas P. O'Neill Jr., all politics is local. Chuck Robb has a vote in the Senate on the tax bill. He needs him. Chuck Robb has stuck with him. It's a way of sending a message out that you stick with me and I stick with you, even in a tough fight. Beyond that, maybe personal factors.
But it was absolutely unprecedented. Almost unprecedented.
Well, it's not quite unprecedented. There have been presidents who've gotten involved in these things. They've often got their fingers burned like FDR did, as was noted. But I think that you can wonder whether this wasn't personal. You can wonder whether their shared role in the Democratic Leadership Council wasn't there. Maybe a little bit of black and white politics. Clinton's not been beyond that before.
All right, now next week I'll ask you whatever happened to health reform.
Good question.
All right, okay. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Kevin.
An update now on the Mississippi flood story. Heavy rains continued feeding the river and its tributaries, and as earthen levees collapsed under the force, thousands more were evacuated from communities up to 7 miles away from the river's edge. Correspondent Elizabeth Brackett reports from the area around St. Louis, where the Mississippi was a foot higher today than yesterday and still rising.
Over the last 65 years, the United States has spent billions to construct an elaborate system of locks, dams, and levees to control the 400 miles of the upper Mississippi River Basin. Now, the 26 dams that stretch from Minneapolis to St. Louis stand wide open. After a month of heavy rain, officials here say there is no way the record-high surging waters can be controlled. And the main line of defense for most communities along the river, the earthen levees, are now starting to give. That's what happened in West Alton, Missouri. Fielding Schultz thought his house would be safe behind the levee. On Tuesday, he could still walk to the front door. When do you think you'll get back to your house again?
Well, if I can get in, I'll come in tomorrow, see where things are.
When do you think you'll be back in residence?
In residence? Oh, my guess is going to be 6 weeks to 2 months.
Then the levee broke. 10 hours later, only the top of the Schultz house could be seen. Because the river water comes in so fast once a levee breaks, evacuation orders are taken seriously. Deerfield Trailer Park in St. Charles, Missouri is 7 miles from the river. But after a levee break last night, the orders were to get out.
When I turned the corner and I saw all of these people and all of these moving trucks, I thought, oh my God, what is going on? I mean, and then I come home and this is like, this isn't a joke, people. This is my home and now I have to leave it. It's all I have.
So you're trying to decide what to take with you?
What do I take? What do I leave here? What do I let go?
Tammy Brinkley was moving into her trailer 4 months ago. Last night, she was frantically deciding what to move out. Fueling her anxiety, she, like many here, does not have flood insurance.
I'm divorced with 2 kids. I can't afford $700 a year for flood insurance. So now I'm looking at losing my home and having nowhere to go with 2 kids. One in a wheelchair. I don't know what I'm going to do.
Late last night, Brinkley left with her children. By this morning, water was already seeping into the area. South of St. Louis, sandbaggers were still battling to save the levee that protects 70 homes in the unincorporated area of Lemay. This was 67-year-old volunteer Vince Winkleman's 3rd day of filling sandbags.
We tried anyway. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, That's what I feel about it. Try to help people out.
Lemay is on a tributary of the Mississippi, the River Desprez. Now, because the Mississippi is so full, it is backing up into the Desprez, and it, like many other tributaries, is actually flowing upstream, weakening the levees along the way. This is the way a levee break begins. The water seeps underneath this earthen levee and comes up in what's called a sand boil. That's what's in the middle of those sandbags behind me. Once this break begins, the entire levee can go. So what these men are doing now is building up the sandbags around the sand boil. They're trying to get them to the same height as the levee. Bridget and David Capper were anxiously watching the attempts to control the sand boil. The house they had bought last October, only 4 doors behind the weakened levee.
They evacuated us at 12:30 last night, gave us an hour to get out.
Yeah.
So why are you still here?
It's kind of hard to leave. You had so much into it.
Yeah.
The struggle to contain the sand boil continued, but just as progress was being made, a new sand boil appeared. Still, county official Buzz Westfall was hoping the levee would hold just as it had in the past.
There was a flood in 1973, and then the levees were built after that as a result of that, and they were built up to protect us from 73 levels. We're going to surpass the 73 levels. We just found out from the Corps of Engineers we're at 41.5 river stage. We're predicted to go at 43.5 was the record in 73, and they're still predicting by Wednesday that the river's going to crest at 45 feet, which is 1.5 feet above the previous flood. The good news for us, and it's tragic news for others, is that levees are breaking north of us, up into the Iowa area and Illinois and farther north in Missouri. And obviously when those levees break, that relieves the pressure on us because we're downriver from them.
15 minutes to the north in St. Louis, the earthen levees were replaced by concrete walls years ago. There is little chance that the river could spill into St. Louis's downtown. Though residents here are pretty amazed by the Mississippi's waters lapping at the steps of their famous arch.
Again, the main stories of this Friday. The leaders of the world's 7 largest industrial nations ended their Tokyo summit with a promise to more closely coordinate economic policies, but they gave few specifics on how they would do so. Tonight, the Associated Press quoted U.S. officials in Tokyo as saying the U.S. and Japan had reached a trade pact aimed at cutting the big imbalance between the two countries. More towns along the flooding Mississippi River were evacuated, and a relentless heat wave continued to set record temperatures on the East Coast. Good night, Roger.
Good night, Robin. That's the News Hour for tonight. We'll see you on Monday. Have a cool and a dry weekend. Thank you and good night.
New York Life is proud to provide funding for the MacNeil Lehrer News Hour. Yet another example of New York Life's wise investment philosophy. Funding has also been provided by PepsiCo. PepsiCo. And by the Archer Daniels Midland Company. ADM, supermarket to the world. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by the annual